We are at the eve of an epic UFC 310 card, a card that I am very, very excited for, a card that's absolutely stacked. We have the flyweight title fight, we have returning heavyweights, we have two welterweight absolute contenders, both undefeated, going at it. Guys, without further ado, let's get into it. And here we are, starting off with the main card and the main event, which is Pantoja versus Asakura. And we're going to walk through pretty much the whole card because, again, there's something to talk about everywhere. But bear with me as we do so. Pantoja versus Asakura. Asakura, who will be debuting and fighting for a title in his debut. I'll be honest with you guys, I haven't seen too much of Asakura. I have done my research in terms of watching YouTube videos, and what I see is a very, very proficient striker. Someone who has more power in his hands than the average flyweight. Someone who I think is very technically proficient, especially on the feet. He will be going up against our champion, Pantoja, who has been, for me, one of the best. I know some of his fights have not been the most exciting. He's a grappler. He's great on the ground. I think he's fairly decent on the feet, not poor at all. But you know, he knows where his bread is buttered. Asakura will challenge him on the feet. There's no doubt about it. But if he's able to get Asakura down, then there's no reason for you to doubt the champion. And if he's able to do it for a couple of rounds, then you could be looking at him retaining once again. I think Pantoja gets way too much hate for the kind of fighter that he actually is. He always comes to fight. He doesn't shirk any challenge. He's earned his way to his title. He's beaten every top contender that has come his way. And for me, I'm so happy he's the flyweight champion. I'm hoping he wins again. I'm relying on his wrestling, his grappling to nullify Asakura's striking. He needs to make sure that he is not caught with any power punches early on in the fight, round 1, round 2, because we've seen Pantoja get rocked before. It wouldn't be a surprise to see him get rocked again. And it also wouldn't be a surprise to see him lose the title, because he is going up against someone who is a champion in their own right, where it may not be the UFC. Rising has produced many a champion in other organizations, and there's no reason to think that this would be different. So that's the main event, one I'm looking forward to very, very much. I've seen Pantoja more. I know Pantoja more. I'm a fan of Pantoja. I'm going with a Pantoja win. Next up, Shavkat versus Garry. Two undefeated fighters. Someone's O has got to go. I'll say it again. Someone's O has got to go. And man, I'm sure the UFC tried to keep these two apart for as long as they could. They did a pretty good job, because I was calling it after their each individual second or third fight. I was like, let's get these two fighting. Let's go. But it's happening now, and it's happening at the perfect time, because it's happening just before either man, whoever wins, will be fighting for a title against Belal Muhammad, and I believe both have the ability to beat him. But who would have a better chance? Shavkat. He has a more well-rounded game. He is more proficient on the ground than Garry. I would say, is slightly better on the feet than Garry, and he presents an all-round overall option and problem for Belal. While Leon Edwards could hold himself up on the ground against Kamaru Usman and put in a decent effort of defensive wrestling and grappling, you need a little bit more, and I think Shavkat can give that to Belal. He's not a full-on wrestler, no, but he can hold his own, most definitely. And he has also been on the other end, where he's submitted people, he's taken them down, he's ragdolled them. He has that ability also. But I know, and I've seen it, he loves to stand, he loves to fight. And Garry and him have been sparring partners. If you're unaware, Garry was open and honest and said that, yeah, Shavkat did choke me out. And again, it's sparring. There's no shame in that. You're there to improve. You're there to learn. And one thing that kind of stood out to me in one of the ceremonial weigh-ins, I believe it was, or one of the other moments that they were just looking at each other, and Shavkat looked so confident. And Garry, I may be wrong, looked a slight bit nervous. Read into that what you will. Two great fighters. Garry I haven't really enjoyed or liked as much from a personal level for some of the antics that he's done, if I'm being honest with you. However, I can separate the art from the artist. Garry has a lot of ability. There's no reason to think why he can't win this fight. Key thing I want to talk about is that Ian Garry holds the height advantage. He does not hold the reach advantage. Shavkat has some long arms, and that means he can keep the longer fighter who likes to fight at distance. He can keep him at arm's reach, which is very, very interesting to say the least. I'm going with Shavkat. I've seen him every one of his UFC fights. He's impressed me. I've seen Ian Garry every one of his UFC fights. I'm just going with Shavkat. I think the more well-rounded game will pay and be the difference between the two men. Next up, Cyril Gane versus Volkov. Gane, who's been missing for like 2 years. The last time we saw him, he was absolutely dominated by John Jones. No disgrace in that. But the way he was dominated wasn't good, to be honest with you. Volkov, on the other hand, is on the ascendancy, having a little bit of a career resurgence. I remember he had experienced some really bad back-to-back losses, and now he's back, fighting Cyril Gane, who is up there with the rest of the heavyweights. He is up there, and even with 1 or 2 victories, he can find himself back in the title picture. Volkov, I've really enjoyed what he's been doing so far. Gane, this layoff was not good, especially after a loss like that. I know he was doing some other obligations. However, we need you in the ring. The key thing for me in this fight is that it's a 3-round fight. It's a 3-round fight. And Gane's style is perfect because he's almost like a point fighter. He will be in and out, popping you with jabs, in and out, popping you with shots. And Volkov will have to chase him. He will have to chase him. And that's how I think it will go for 2 of the 3 rounds before Volkov experiences a high level of success. I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time, but I'm going with Cyril Gane. Next up, Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. This is the second time I will be watching Kron Gracie. First time I watched him, that was a disgraceful performance, if I'm being honest with you. And he said as much himself. So, Kron, we're aligned. Wasn't good at all. And he's looking to make an amends 2 to 3 years on. Bryce Mitchell has been on an awful run of form as of lately. The man who, I think at one point was in the top 6 in the division, top 5, top 6 in the division, if I'm not mistaken, has, lost all relevancy. And ever since the Topuria fight, if I remember correctly, I think it's just been downhill from there. However, I'm not going with Kron Gracie. Bryce Mitchell, if you cannot beat Kron Gracie, who has 7 MMA fights and hasn't fought at the top echelon of the division like you have, we have a serious problem. Get the job done and move on and start rebuilding your career. So I'm going with Bryce Mitchell there. Nate Ludwig versus Choi. I know Nate a lot more than I know Choi. I don't think I've actually watched Choi fight, or I have and just can't remember. Ludwig, I think, is always someone who's up for a good fight. Never is shying away from a battle. Intense, to say the least. And yeah, I think he will put up a very, very good fight. Key things to notice is the amount of output he has. Can you guys see that? 6.25 significant strikes per minute. And he's and that's very, very high if you are unaware. But Choi isn't too far behind, 4.41 significant strikes, but hits at a much higher clip. I think this fight could be a bit of a sleeper. I want to see what Choi can do because, again, I haven't been able to digest many of his fights. And so I may be in for a little bit of a shocker watching this fight. I'm going to go with Nate just based on knowledge. And I'm hoping Choi can surprise me and put on a great fight. Dominic Reyes versus Anthony Smith. What can we say about this one? Dominic Reyes and Anthony Smith, both former light heavyweight contenders who both fought John Jones, who both ended up coming off badly, unfortunately for them. Dominic Reyes is in rebuild mode, and it's great to see because it didn't look good for a long period of time. And I'll be honest with you, no one wanted to see him go out like that, if we're being 100% frank. It's good to see him have to come back. He's always been an athlete. He's always said it. He played multiple sports. He's been well-rounded. So that athleticism is going to be key in that light heavyweight division, where some may not have the same level of athleticism or same sporting pedigree. Dominic Reyes needs to use that to his advantage. Anthony Smith, on the other hand, I'll be honest with you, I would like Anthony to start considering retirement. Some of his performances as of recent have been less than desirable, and I would want to see him move on, allow some new fresh blood for the light heavyweight division. If we're being honest, he's not going to be challenging for a title again. He's fought nearly 60 MMA fights. And yeah, it's getting to that time where thinking, Anthony, you can down tools, it's okay, you know, and move on essentially, because I feel like the light heavyweight division is slowly but surely passing him by. And I think this is another page in that chapter when Dominic Reyes wins and beats Anthony Smith. Next up, Vicente Luque versus Gorimbo. Quickly on this one, Vicente Luque, one of my favourites when in his prime. I think he is exiting that prime, similar to some of the other stories we've covered and fighters that we've covered and their stories. Vicente Luque hasn't been on great foot. Gorimbo, we know his story, how he's come up, seen him fight, a lot more technically proficient than I thought he would be. He has a stature that can be very beneficial in the welterweight division, and going up against Vicente Luque, who's a veteran, is going to be very interesting. I may be wrong again, and I hate to do this to Vicente Luque because he's been losing to people in and around him. Gorimbo is not in and around him. This is an upper-comer, and this is Vicente Luque needing a fight that will boost his confidence. And I may be wrong, but I'm going to go with Gorimbo here. I'm thinking the bigger man, while less experienced, while having less pedigree and essentially know-how, I think that Vicente Luque, if he gets caught, is in a world of hurt and trouble, because he's been hurt seriously before, and that's been the end of the fight. And so flashbacks, you haven't been in the greatest vein of form, these things can definitely happen. One fight I cannot believe is on the prelims is Everlov versus Sterling. A card that is this good should not have these two this far down. They should be on the main card, but we know why they're not. Both did not sell this fight at all well. Very, very poor. Both have a very high grappling fight style, which is not what Dana really wants to showcase or see. And thirdly, yeah, I'm shocked. Is what I can say. Aljamain Sterling, former champion. Everlov, undefeated, 18-0. It's the styles, it's the personalities. Didn't sell, or they didn't think it would sell or entertain, so they put it on the prelims. And it's sad to see, to be honest with you, especially for Aljamain Sterling. It feels like the UFC just don't really like him. Everlov, we know they don't like him. His fights, and I've said this before, and I can deal with a lot of different styles, but Everlov has done this before, where he will take you down and he won't try and do anything with it, and that annoys me so much. If you're going to take him down, I want to see some ground and pound. I want to see a submission attempt. I want to see some movement, some changes in position on the ground. Do something. Don't just lay on him and expect to win these fights. You can, because it's been working, but sooner or later, a judge or a fighter or somebody will have enough of that style, a referee, and the fight will be continued. Everlov or Sterling? I mean, it's experience versus undefeated, essentially, and the pedigree that we've seen from Everlov. It's a difficult one. I think I'm going to go Everlov to keep undefeated, and it's a hard one for me to say. Aljo has the tools to beat him. He is a backpack. If Everlov thinks he's going to dominate a ground game against Sterling, he might. He could hold him there, but if you dare let him go, he will scramble and potentially take your back, and that will put you in a world of pain, and that will see you collect your first defeat. But Everlov, if you can hold him down and keep him there, then that's another question entirely. I'm going to go Everlov here to keep his undefeated streak and continue 19-0. Hopefully I don't regret that. Randy Brown versus Brian Battle. Quick one on this one. Brian Battle actually did miss weight, unfortunately. He will be coming in over, I think he weighed in 4 pounds over. Randy Brown actually did mention this and said it's completely unfair. You lose a slight bit of your purse to gain a massive advantage in the fight, and he's going to come in weighing around 185, where he's saying Brian Battle was going to be weighing in north of 200, which is crazy. And so in my analysis of the fight, I do think Brian Battle will win. It will be closely contended. I think both men will bring a dog fight. I truly believe that. I think Brian Battle will actually bring the best out of Randy Brown, but losing the ability to have what I would call a fair fight by weighing over really diminishes it for me for Brian Battle, and the weight gain will probably be an advantage to him in that fight. But for me, I've got to give it to Randy Brown now, because I'm not a fan of people not doing what they say they're going to do. And Brian Battle said he was going to come in on weight, and he didn't. And I understand how difficult weight cutting is, but yeah, Randy did his job. Brian, you needed to do yours. So I'm going to go with Randy Brown based on that, changing my original pick. Into the early prelims very quickly. Chris Weidman, this should be your retirement match, please. Eric Anders, if you want to join him, you can. Originally scheduled for 3:09, now happening at 3:10. And yeah, Chris is quite interesting, the career he's had. I remember watching him growing up, the win against Anderson Silva. I remember the broken leg for Anderson Silva. I remember him now breaking his leg. And I think he actually spoke about it where, like, in the beginning when Anderson broke his leg, he wasn't, a lot of the things he was doing was distasteful. And I think in reflection, and as time went on, he did own that. But when he had his own injury, it was great to see Anderson show that love and care. And I think even Chris was like, man, I was such a XYZ during that time, and now I know what it is like on the other side. And so for him to come back and be where he is and fighting at age 40 is a great accomplishment. But I would say now, guys, for both of you, if you can wrap it up, Chris exit with a win, we will be very, very happy. I'm not going to cover Durden versus Van. We'll let that one surprise us. Chiesa versus Max Griffin. I don't know, I swear to you, I haven't got anything against the older generation of the UFC, but Chiesa is one of those people, like Ivanov on occasion, where he will take you down and he will do absolutely nothing with that takedown. And not all occasions, because I know Chiesa is a bit of a submission wizard. He can get submissions. I'm not saying all the time, but there's fights I remember clear as day where he was making no opportunity to submit the fighter or ground and pound. He was just looking to survive until the final bell, and that's not great. He did win his last fight against Tony Ferguson. I did think Tony Ferguson was going to win. Will I bet against Chiesa again with Max Griffin on this side now? And I've watched Max Griffin a couple of times. Steady fighter. Have never really been truly blown away, if I'm being honest with you. Chiesa to me is the all-round better fighter. He's the better fighter. I say all-round. Chiesa striking isn't that great. But he's the better fighter. And that should take him out on top. But I want to see Max Griffin win. So I'm throwing all logic out the window. Max Griffin, I'm giving it to you, my boy. Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. Two fighters who are on opposite ends of their career. Chase is becoming a little bit of a veteran. You know, he stepped into the UFC very, very early, and has now established himself as a reliable person within his division, and he's going to keep climbing. Only 25. Clay Guida, again, is a legend of the UFC. He's done so many things. At the age of 42, he's still fighting, still grinding. Ability, for me, that kind of highlights him is, one, how dogged he is. He doesn't give up. He will march you down at every occasion. And two, the wrestling is his backbone and his entry into, you know, the MMA world. And he is very, very proficient. It'll be interesting to see his wrestling against the grappling and the jiu-jitsu of Chase Hooper, who does not play. He's got long limbs. He knows how to use them. And I will be very intrigued to see how Clay Guida is able to deal with someone like Chase Hooper, who has the stature advantage, who has the reach advantage. It will be very interesting, definitely. And now onto our final fight of the night. Nzechukwu versus Brzezek. I haven't seen Brzezek before, I won't lie to you, or if I have, I can't remember. Nzechukwu, watched many of his fights, like heavyweight. This is his second fight in the heavyweight division. He first fought Chris Barnett, who is miniature, and so this will be his first fight against someone who's roughly around the same height and stature of him. Nzechukwu, hit and miss. He's hit and miss. Like, I don't know what it is. It almost feels like a heart issue. Like, is your heart really in it sometimes when he's fighting some of these people? And I'm sure it is. It's just, you need to show it a little bit more. I'm going to go with Nzechukwu this fight again. I don't know Brzezek too well. Nzechukwu I do. He did win his debut at heavyweight, and I'm expecting him to I'm expecting him to continue the momentum. So guys, that has been the full 310 card. Make sure to capture every fight across that I'm showing you now, because I will want a score rating and I will need your input. If we head over to the main event and main card, we will see that we have covered an amazingly stacked card. If I was to give this one a ranking, I would say an 8.5 or a 9. I want to go higher. The only reason I was saying an 8.5 is that it would be nice to have 2 title fights. Yeah, I would really enjoy that. A flyweight title fight and another, but again, you have to, beggars can't be choosers, and the Shavkat versus Garry one is pretty much like a title fight anyway, with how good both men are. Guys, make sure to leave a like, subscribe and comment. I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your predictions. I want to hear it all. Guys, hopefully you're looking forward to 310, and I will catch you guys soon. Peace.